Greetings, Africa enthusiast. Let me tell you what divide really means. It means someone drew a line on paper and millions of people lived inside the consequences. It means the map was treated like a weapon and not a tool. Because if an empire can draw your reality, it can own your reality. So today we're talking about the Inter Caetera of 1493 and the Spanish and Portugal map split mentality. Who drew the lines and why your life still feels like them. Here's the comment rules. Sources only. No trolling, no harassment, no slurs. Bring receipts. That's how we do it on BWise. So, in episode 1, we exposed the discovery lie. We found it, so we own it. In episode 2, showed the holy paperwork, religion used like an empire contract. Now, in episode 3 is where it becomes geometry. Because once the conquest becomes a line on a map, it stops looking like violence and starts looking like administration. And that's where erasure gets slick. It hides inside paper borders, labels, and official categories. Today, I'm going to do 5 important things. I'm going to define the Inter Caetera in plain terms, explain the line of demarcation and why Portugal objected. And then I'm going to show how the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494 extends the very same logic. So I'll name what map divide does to identity and power. In the last 4 minutes, I'm handing off directly into Johnson versus McIntosh and Marshall Trilogy. So you see how map logic becomes court logic. Now, in chapter 1, we're talking about the claiming paper. The Inter Caetera is a papal bull issued by Pope Alexander VI in 1493. Here's the simplest truth version. It's a document responding to Columbus's voyage under Spanish sponsorship, and it frames discovered lands not already claimed by Christians as belonging to Spain, while acknowledging Portugal had prior rights related to its discovery. Now, notice what I just said to you. Not already claimed by Christians becomes the gate. The people living there don't get mentioned as owners in the way Europeans recognize ownership. The land is treated like an asset waiting for assignment. This is the discovery lie with an official stamp. If it isn't Christian owned, it's claimable. And BWise is going to say it plainly. That isn't spiritual leadership. That's geopolitical authorization. So now we're going to talk about the line when a map becomes a weapon. So in the Inter Caetera is tied to the idea of a pole to a pole dividing a line. A demarcation line meant to organize who gets what to prevent Spain and Portugal from fighting each other over claims. Princeton's map resource summarizes the idea Pope Alexander VI decreed in the Inter Caetera that lands west and south of a demarcation line would belong to Spain, and Portugal objected because it felt its rights were ignored or threatened. This is a key point. The line isn't about justice. It's about managing rivalry between two powers who already agreed the world was theirs to divide. So when people ask, how did they justify it? They didn't start with, is this right? They started with, how do we organize the taking? That's what a demarcation line is, a bureaucratic solution to conquest competition. So here is the truth. The line isn't proof of discovery. It's proof of an agreement among thieves. Now, this is where the momentum between Spain and Portugal is picking up full speed. Legally, ethically, or not, this is the Treaty of Tordesillas, the map divide, where it gets formal. So here, Portugal objects. So what happens? The divide is now signed. They renegotiate the line. The Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494 is the next step, an agreement between Spain and Portugal, the band of thieves, dividing newly discovered lands outside Europe into spheres of influence. Britannica notes the treaty amended earlier papal bulls and shifted the line of demarcation westward to accommodate Portugal's objections. So the National Geographic Education describes it as Spain and Portugal drawing a north to south line in the Atlantic and claiming lands on either side. Portugal to the east and Spain to the west. Now, here is the BWise translation. The church paperwork, the doctrine of discovery, sets the legitimacy language. The treaty paperwork is now setting the logistics, and then ships, soldiers, and markets do the rest. So when you hear the Treaty of Tordesillas, don't imagine a civilized compromise. Imagine a boardroom, two powers dividing a world that already had people. Not only people, diverse groups of people with livable and sustainable means who were already thriving. So, a treaty, this is the truth, a treaty can be orderly and still be criminal. More importantly, let's talk about the map divide and talk about it in the frame as a mindset. Now, the map divide really is what says in their mind land is an object, people are incidental, authority is whoever writes it first. And then the reality belongs to the one with the stamp. Now you have to see the stamp as a place of authority. So that's why I keep saying paperwork can be violence because borders just don't manage geography. Think about the deportation and what's happening today. Borders manage identity, movement, citizenship, resources, determines who is legal, who is foreign, who belongs, and who is disposable. And if you're a person whose history was targeted by conquest, such as the indigenous, Black, Afro indigenous, borders can become a cage that you didn't build. So here is the BWise truth. If someone else draws your line, they can redraw your life. And least we not forget, let's talk about the border erases. This is identity erasure. The border is actually a category machine. Erasure isn't just forgetting names. Erasure is when the system forces you into categories that benefit the system. And when you look at the Afro indigenous people, Black people, how many categories have we been assigned? It's because assigning the categories is a benefit to the system. Let's talk about why it benefits the system. A map divide is one of the earliest modern examples of forced categorization. This is Spain's, this is Portugal's, this is Christian claimable. This is not. BWise Africa enthusiasts, the people living on the land did not get a vote or say so. They simply get processed by Spain and Portugal and the Christian church. Now, let me connect this directly to Black identity and erasure without doing sloppy history work. So, this Spain and Portugal map split is not the same thing as chattel slavery. Different mechanisms, but it lives through the same architecture by defining who counts, defining who owns, define who is protected, it defines who is profitable. So once you accept the idea that someone can claim a place as if people aren't owners, it becomes easier to accept that someone can claim a person, in this case, persons, as if they aren't fully human. So here is the truth. Erasure always starts with classification. BWise Africa enthusiasts. Here we're going to name the mechanisms of naming the machine. So, what is the mechanism? It's the papal authorization and demarcation lines and treaties to divide claims. So, this is what it actually steals. It steals land rights, sovereignty, and the right to define reality. Who are the beneficiaries? The crowns, merchants, investors, empires, and later settler states. Who paid the price of this machine? Indigenous nations and communities, including Afro-Indigenous people and Black communities, including those with indigenous ties. So this is how erasure works. You rename and reclassify and document, and lastly, deny. Erasure can only work under these four ideas: rename and reclassify and document to make it legal, and deny, deny, deny. And the modern echo is borders as control, paperwork as power, legality as the cover story. So now let's take a deeper dive into the modern echo to understand who drew your lines. Now, here's where this becomes personal, and not in a soft way, in a factual way. The map divide logic lives on whenever a border is treated as a sacred or more sacred than the people living around it or within the border. Paperwork overrides the lived reality. Power says your identity is what we say it is. And then institutions decide who belongs and who doesn't. So I want you to hear this. You can't debate identity seriously if you won't debate the map and the division of the map, because maps are not neutral. Maps are decision makers. So ask this question, and it is not a rhetorical question. What modern border or identity was forced by someone else's map? Now, some of you live inside borders drawn by conquest. Some of you live inside the racial categories designed for labor control. And some of you live inside both. And the point of this series is to stop acting like those categories are natural when they are not. So here's the truth. If the map is political, the identity categories built from it are political too. Now, here, I want to bring some clarity, and let's bring this discussion on home. Let's do this by recapping what we proved today. The Inter Caetera frames discovered lands not claimed by Christians as assignable to Spain, while acknowledging Portugal's claim. A demarcation line is a conquest management tool, not a justice tool. So the Treaty of Tordesillas formalizes the divide. Spain and Portugal claim spheres of influence outside Europe. So here's the map divide. It is a mindset. We can assign your world without you. Now here's the handoff. Here's the hard, fast handoff. We're going into Johnson and Marshall Trilogy. This is the bridge from the map lines to our current court lines. So in episode 3, it was about the map lines. And in episode 4, it's going to show you how the map logic becomes the court logic. Because once Europe normalizes the discovery and claim it, the U.S. courts inherit that worldview. And in Johnson versus McIntosh of 1823, the Supreme Court says it plainly. Discovery gave an exclusive right to extinguish the Indian title of occupancy by purchase or by conquest. Now that's the discovery lie in legal form. The map divide becomes the title divide. Man, y'all better get with this doctrine. Listen, listen, listen. And so now we are working our way through what we call a hot mess. Then comes the next tightening move. The Cherokee Nation versus Georgia in 1831, where Chief Justice Marshall uses the phrase domestic dependent nations. Now, let me translate that. Not foreign nations, so less standing, not fully sovereign in the way the U.S. now recognizes. Dependent, like a ward under a guardian framework. That language is a cage. So, are we following what the doctrine of discovery did in these American streets? So, here is the jurisdiction control. Who has authority where? Come on, get on in the room. Then Worcester versus Georgia in 1832 hits the jurisdiction question, whether states like Georgia can impose their laws over Cherokee territory and relations governed by U.S. treaties and federal authority. Come on, let's get in the room. This is the next step after the map divide. First, divide the world on paper. Secondly, divide title in court. Then lastly, control jurisdiction. How are you going to do that? Who can do this? The police? Regulate, punish, and extract. And this is where episode 4 and episode 5 is going to take us. So by now, I'm hoping that we have a clear picture on what Spain, Portugal, and Christians did. So today, we did a map divide. Now you're ready for what comes next. Johnson versus McIntosh. And the discovery becomes the U.S. title doctrine. Cherokee Nation versus Georgia. And the domestic dependent nations. The language tightens sovereignty. And the Worcester versus Georgia. And the jurisdiction control becomes the battleground. We getting into some serious business here. So drop your source in the comments and answer the pinned question. What modern border or identity was forced by someone else's map, because BWine is not a performance stage. It is a truth table.